In the previous chapter, we ended with a possible battle between the Phantom Troupe members and Luini of the Hisoka family. In this week's one, we get more insight as to who the Hisoka family is, as well as Kenny, the underboss of Cha-R. Oh, and of course, we see more of Hisoka, but this time interacting with Hinrik. There's also something of a resolution to the battle between Luini and Nobunaga, but we'll get to that shortly. Without further ado, let's get into the spicy details of the chapter called Solicit. Picking up right where we left off previously, Luini is still playing with the Phantom Troupe members. Sure, he's clear about his intentions now, saying, "I don't want to fight you." He even goes as far as saying he just wanted to team up and kill the other families involved in the three-way confrontation. But despite that, the members of the troupe, especially Nobunaga, aren't letting down their guard, ready to strike in an instant. With Luini revealing his plan, his hands out, placating and trying to convince them to work alongside him, Nobunaga takes that moment to slowly walk towards him, his sword still drawn. Anyone else would realize the danger they're in, but Luini is just so certain of who he thinks they are and how they'll take his proposition that he's not paying attention to the signs. Luini, oblivious to what's coming, continues on explaining that he'll go after the Cha-R family first, which is where he currently is, and then take on Shiu, and finally, the royal family. But that's not enough. Luini even wants to take over the ship and cause chaos wherever they can go with it. Once again, we're reminded that though the troupe can be ruthless, they do so for specific reasons. They aren't anarchists like the Joker or even Hisoka who causes trouble just because they can. They do things mainly to gain a profit, to raise themselves out of the slums they came from, and sometimes to pass the time. But I digress. As Luini excitedly shouts, "Let's all band together and burn the world to the ground," his time in this world has already ended. Nobunaga takes but a moment to jab him with his blade, right in the center of his forehead. It's so fast that Luini even has a moment to wonder what just happened, as he says, "Huh?" Nobunaga, always more into doing things on a whim and as he pleases, admits he wasn't really following that whole speech. He also adds that killing the guard in the Cha-R was a mistake since it sent them the wrong message. Even before his appearance, their goal was to end the assassin, and that didn't change. Clearly. When Nobunaga pulls his sword out, it's possible Luini wasn't completely dead. But considering how the sword user follows it up with another slice or two, while also saying, "I'll destroy you," it's safe to say he finished him off. But anyway, before we continue this fascinating chapter, be sure to subscribe with notifications on and smash that like button if you want more Hunter x Hunter in your life. The members of the Cha-R who are walking down the long hall finally arrive at the door. One of them is the super Phantom Troupe fan Sudonke, still intent on getting the autograph paper. He bangs on the door saying, "Yo, we're back," with no idea of what the people inside just went through. Seeing as Nobunaga just finished slicing up Luini, he's the closest to answer and opens the door, which obviously makes Sudonke happy. He doesn't say it aloud, but his thoughts certainly show it, not to mention the little heart icon. After he's finished fanboying, Sudonke finally notices that people are missing, likely dead, and Nobunaga says Luini did it, starting to explain. But before we can get any details, we instead get a clear and bloody shot of Luini with his head cut off, and a trail of blood leading from the door. This is probably because they dragged his body in to let Sudonke and the rest come inside, or it's because his body collapsed after his power was interrupted by his decapitation. Either way, it shocked Sudonke to the point he can't help but shout, "Is that?" This is interesting since he thinks so highly of the troupe, but he seems to lose all sense of politeness with this situation. Nobunaga isn't bothered though. He just tells him that's the assassin, and here's his head. Why is he still holding on to it? Was it because they arrived just as he had cut it off, or was he holding it in case there was some Nen ability that could be triggered after Luini's death? Maybe it was just meant as proof that they'd completed the task of taking down the assassin. Regardless, Nobunaga tells them, Luini's severed head in his grasp, that they've decided to crush the Hisoka family. Oh boy, okay, so was Luini's decision to try and recruit them the worst he could have done? It might have pushed the troupe to hate their way of thinking so much that they now want to eradicate them from the world. Sudonke just stares, taken aback by the sudden announcement. Fighthand continues, saying, "Thanks for your hospitality." Finks also says, "We're gonna get back to hunting Hisoka," adding that they'll take care of Hisoka as well if the Cha-R family has any intel to share with them. All the while, Sudonke is so blown away and impressed by them that he can hardly contain his excitement just from being around them. Thankfully, he doesn't say that out loud though. With another shot of the outside of the ship reminding us that we're steadily moving forward and that there isn't much time left until the delivery deadline, Sudonke decides he's gonna get that paper no matter what. We move on to the Hisoka members, probably still in their base considering they say, "We didn't even have to leave the base to get kills." Interestingly, we see a body smashed and bloody on the wall as they discuss Luini's death, and it's almost as if they're seeing his body and commenting on it, but from the position and the place where it was severed, it seems to just be a victim of theirs. By the way, the people speaking include Demon, Gelato, Paragol, and Billet. They're all members of Hisoka and close to or at least level 20 within their group. Gelato points out that they can't hunt out in the open anymore because the army is preventing them from doing so. At least there's still some things keeping the Hisoka members from just making a bloodbath. Paragol suggests that they somehow recreate Luini's ability since it was the best way to catch victims and kill them without being caught, and also being out in the open. But Billet isn't happy with this suggestion since he already has an ability in mind, and it's clearly not that. As we get a full view of the room where they're casually chatting, it's clear to see there's definitely something wrong with this family. There's bodies all around them, blood all over the walls, and it looks more like a war zone than a base of operations. Paragol reminds them, and us, that everyone is born with something different, and you can't decide what your affinity will be. Luini was an emitter, so the solution would be to get someone else in their family in the same category to fill his spot. Gelato points out that they only get those positions when they reach level 21, which none of them are at yet. Billet does want to be an emitter, not that he can choose it, but he doesn't intend on becoming a replacement for Luini. At that, an emitter named Baconte, also labeled as a human trafficker, raises his hand to get their attention. He suggests they just work with what they already have, and modify it in a way so that it can work in the same way that Luini's teleportation did. Demon asks if Baconte is referring to his door power, and when he confirms it, they realize it's a good idea. Unlike with Luini though, they have to wait for someone to wander into the trap, which might take more work on their part. If you consider that Luini could just place spots to jump to, look for people there, and drag them into his teleportation spots, yeah, Luini had the advantage. At that, more members of the Hisoka arrive, the ones who confronted Hinrik previously and ditched Padui when it was clear they were no match for the pigeons. Surprisingly, or maybe not considering their mentality, Paragol is eating when they come in, with the dead bodies still all around them. Tevalaris comments that it's really dark in the room, while Carol asks if there's any emitters who can help them deal with Hinrik. Amusingly, the prior group was just discussing how much they need emitters, and now these two have the same issue. Madovel, a level 18 university student, interrupts them with pick me, but now that we know you can only get your affinity at level 21 and up, it's weird for him to volunteer when he knows he doesn't qualify. Anyway, Madovel tells them he's an aspiring emitter, hoping to get a projectile ability. Carol asks him if he could deal with handcuffs that turn into pigeons, to which Madovel is confused. Yeah, I can't say I blame him. Tevalaris explains that the Shiu underboss, aka Hinrik, took out Padui using that ability. But because it's good at long-range attacks and also defense, they need a way to deal with Hinrik from a distance as well. Madovel doesn't sound too discouraged and considers that he might be able to deal with it if he tried. Gelato doesn't seem convinced though. She accompanies the two men who faced Hinrik so they can speak with Morena and try to find a solution for the Nen pigeon problem. Unsurprisingly, Morena admits it's not an easy thing to solve, seeing as it depends on the person involved and their ability. She also explains that if one attack isn't enough, it would be better to have someone who can do multiple to ensure they're successful. If that isn't enough, then binding them or nullifying their ability might be better options in order to win. She even correctly points out that an emitter type might not be needed. Gelato considers that, saying that she hopes she'll be a conjurer so she can try that out. Morena asks if she'd like to know her affinity, but she refuses to find out. The surprise is always better. Getting back to the Shiu family, we see Zakuro slowly opening his eyes after clearly being knocked out. If you recall, he was last seen talking to Hisoka and leading him to Hinrik so they could have a chat. Now we find him passed out, but still in possession of his IV bags, lying on the ground next to some garbage. Lynch seems to be fine now, as she's the one who woke him up. Bending down in front of him, she asks Zakuro if he's okay. And yeah, he's great! You know why? Because he survived an encounter with Hisoka! Lynch says he was already gone when she came to, and Zakuro tells her that they were supposed to see a movie together, but he got knocked out instead. Talk about a sudden change of heart. Also, who'd have thought Hisoka was a fan of movies? Lynch suggests they report what happened to Hinrik, which they were meant to anyway, since the two are no match for Hisoka. We move to the cinema area, where there's snack stands and people lounging around. There's also a poster of Thing, which may or may not be a reference to The Thing. Either way, Zakuro is back with Hinrik and he lets him know where to find Hisoka. Though they have a crowd ready to face him, Hinrik tells them all to fall back, because their goal isn't to scare him off or trigger his bloodlust. At the same time, they do need to all be there to ensure that Hisoka doesn't get away again, so Hinrik tells them to each take one room and sweep them that way. Zakuro lets his underboss know that he'll be rejoining Lynch so that they can continue looking for Crollo. Hinrik isn't against this plan, but he worries that it might put them in too much danger. Zakuro tells him, we'll give them Hisoka's location in exchange for wiping out the Hisoka. That's certainly the kind of information the Troupe is looking for. Hisoka is seated in room 8, with people in front of him looking worried and whispering to each other. But they're not looking at him. They're looking at the underboss who has just arrived, Hinrig. Some of them even get up and leave, probably afraid of a confrontation. Unbothered, Hisoka stays in his seat and Hinrig plops down next to him. Other members of the Shiu family stand guard around the room, probably to stop Hisoka from leaving. Good luck to them if they think they can. Moving only his eyes, Hinrig asks Hisoka if he is who he believes him to be. Hisoka only looks at him, saying nothing. So Hinrig tells him, "I'll cut to the chase. I have a request." This gets an interested look from Hisoka. With more bravery than others have had around Hisoka, Hinrig politely asks him to move to a VIP room they have for him, so he doesn't get involved with the inevitable fight between Shiu-Heil-Ly and the Troupe members. He even tells Hisoka, "If you attack the Troupe, you'll be our enemy too," which is a scary notion, honestly. Hisoka, of course, turns to face him at that, even smiling a bit, and he says it would be fine for him if that happened. At that, Hinrig finally starts to sweat. Keeping the worry internal, we find out that he knew Hisoka would feel that way, but he's not confident he could fight the Troupe or Hisoka. He looks down, worried, and when he looks back at Hisoka, who's watching him very closely, Hinrig tries to appeal to his common sense. He lets Hisoka know that the balance will be destroyed if Heil-Ly is left as they are, and the Troupe are willing to help restore the balance. With that, he hopes Hisoka can just wait a bit longer before starting any fights. Inside, we see that Hinrig is actually excited at the prospect of seeing Hisoka and the Troupe members facing off, but it just wouldn't help his current goal, even if he believes their battle would be one in a lifetime. What he does say is that too much to ask? Hisoka grins slightly, asking his own question in reply, "Who do you think will win?" And I wonder if he asks that to help him decide on his choice to follow the request, or if he's just plain curious. With Hisoka, it's always hard to tell what he's thinking. Not missing a beat, Hinrig admits he prefers the spiders and actually appreciates all the members. Hisoka laughs at that, impressed by Hinrig's honesty, and definitely seeing it as an extra challenge that this person who's clearly afraid of him still thinks he'd lose. On the other hand, he accepts the special room that's been provided to him by the Shiu family, while admitting that if the Troupe does come after him, he'll have no choice but to retaliate. But hey, at least he won't be seeking them out directly? We leave the scene in the cinema and meet back up with the army guard who made a deal with Hinrig for Morena's location. Looking paranoid, gun in hand, his eyes dart around. But instead of Hinrig, it's Kenny who makes it to the location first. Kenny pretends he's asking about the fight Hinrig had previously with the Heil-Ly family, but it's clear he knows something is up. The guard pretends that he would have turned Hinrig over to the police if needed, but Kenny calls him out on his obvious corruption. This annoys him, of course, and he tells him to beat it. Kenny drops the act he had been playing and gets down to business. He can tell this man is high-ranking and that he's likely got plans with Hinrig. He's not wrong so far. The guard doesn't even deny it, and tells Kenny what was going to happen. When the corporal says he'll just put the information up for auction instead, Kenny seems to be annoyed. As the corporal pushes for him to pay up if he wants it, Kenny agrees to pay whatever Hinrig had offered. Not only that, but Kenny intends to wait for Hinrig so they can all go together, meaning the guard would be getting 50 million from both parties, or that's how it seems at least. The details are shared, but the corporal worries that Hinrig won't be happy with his new agreement. Kenny lets him know that their families are working together right now, so it isn't a problem. Ever the honest man, Kenny tells the corporal why they're working together and how they feel about the Heil-Ly family. He even offers the guard 5 million for every family member he reports to them. The deal sounds good to the corporal, but his only fear is if any members get away, they would immediately know who betrayed them. So he asks Kenny if he can ensure they are all taken down, just so he can sleep easy. And we get one of the most disturbing panels and smiles we've ever seen. There's nothing overtly terrifying about it. I think it's just the fact that Kenny is always serious, so for him to grin so widely and look so happy just seems out of place. Maybe the fact that he's saying, "we'll wipe out every last one," makes it that much more scary. It's not just us who's shocked by the smile, though. The corporal tells us it's called Smile Zero, Ice Cold Smirk, and for it to be known and have such a reputation must mean something negative is attached to it. Which, well, the corporal says that anyone who sees the smile ends up dead. So it's like the kiss of death in some ways, I suppose. But we and the guard don't feel convinced. In fact, this might be foreshadowing that Kenny doesn't just want to kill the Heil-Ly family, but this corporal as well so he can get their money back. Waiting with the corporal, he points out that some people are coming towards them. They turn out to be part of the Shiu family, with one of them being presented as Capo Connery. Sure, Hinrig isn't there himself, but this person is from the same family, so he's there for the deal after all. He has a massive bag of money with him, prepared to hand it over for the information. The corporal leads them, as promised, to the spot he found suspicious. He explains that it's Tier 3's first-class area, where a lot of unsavory business goes down. We get a shot of them as they approach the room, and Hinrig is there with Kenny after all. Connery stays behind them with the money. As we're given a floor plan of the first-class rooms, it does sound a bit fishy that this one is without a wall in the toilet. Though this is mostly guesswork, Kenny does think it would be in a good spot to house some hidden Hisoka members, considering it's at the edge of the ship. But in order to be safe, Henrik suggests that the corporal do the knocking, since he's less likely to be attacked if it's the right place. As the corporal knocks, someone responds right away, and he lets them know it's the Kakin army. He makes up an excuse about needing to conduct an inspection, and the man slowly opens the door to let him see inside. With a shaky, almost worried tone, he says, "Oh, well, I don't mind. I have nothing to hide after all." Now, this man might fool most people, but us Hunter x Hunter fans know better. Don't trust anyone. The guard points his gun, asking if he's alone inside the room. The man looks terrified, raising up his arms and begging for the corporal not to shoot. He backs up, his arms still up, non-threatening. But the guard, like us, is still worried and orders him to sit on the bed. In an instant, even less than that, the guard is inside and the underbosses want to follow him. But when they do, the corporal is nowhere to be seen. Henrik and Kenny are shocked by this change. They stay right outside the doorway watching the man inside the room. Still using his fake scared voice, the man says, "Oh, he didn't come alone. You don't look like you're with the army." Even though he suspects them, he invites them in. But they aren't so quick to step inside. In fact, Henrik only peeks his head in, asking where the corporal went. Still acting strange, the man pretends he's not sure where he is, that maybe he went to the toilet. And again, he asks them to come in. See, this is where we should have alarms ringing, right? He's almost too pushy about them passing the doorway. Henrik, the long-range fighter that he is, throws a knife next to the man's head to test out the mechanics of what's happening. The knife is firmly planted in the wall and hasn't disappeared. At that, the man is finally scared for real, and Henrik orders him to come to them instead. But the man repeats his eerie phrase of "I have nothing to hide." This is the third time he said those exact words, and the text on the side of the panel emphasizes this by saying, "Recite it 3 times." Does this mean that they're in trouble now, that whatever conditions needed to be met have succeeded? Or is he meant to convince the person he's speaking to that he's just an innocent man in an empty room? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Let us know what you think might happen next. Do you think Hisoka is going to respect the agreement to stand down temporarily? Let's hope so. That's all for now. This is Jack Stansbury, and have a great day.